Good morning, everybody. How is everyone today? I guess everybody, I know a few people were in here for the summit, or the previous panel, which was fantastic about gaming, and now we're going to talk about music. I'm Amy Terrell. I'm Executive Vice President of Music Canada, and I've got a fantastic panel here to my left, so I'm going to sit down, we're going to get started, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we have a bit of time here this morning. We'll make sure we're open for questions at the end, so about 15 minutes of questions at the end, and there will be a roving mic, so please wait until you've got a mic before you answer the questions so that our online audience can hear as well. And we'll get started. So, to my left is Alan Cross. Alan, I'm sure a lot of people know Alan. He's a broadcaster, interviewer, writer, blogger, all sorts of things, media, guru.
Just try and tell my parents what I do for a living.
Well, it's hard to choose of all the things that you do, Alan, but Alan, many people know about his successful documentary series, The Ongoing History of the Music. 20 years?
20, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really great. So, happy to have Alan here. To his left is Steve Kane. Steve is the president of Warner Music Canada and has been so since in the early 2000s for a while. And before that, before he even joined Warner Music Canada in 2001, he worked in the industry for over 15 years with other organizations. And some of the things, what I really enjoy about Steve is just some of the Canadian artists that he's signed and has worked with to build Canadian and international careers. Some of those names that we love, Billy Talent, most recently our Scott Hellman, who just won an award. Yeah, it was fantastic. And a lot of other artists that you work with as well. Blue Rodeo have had a very successful partnership with them. So welcome to Steve Kane.
Thank you very much, Amy. Good morning, everyone.
And then Paul Touch, to Steve's left. Paul is with Nielsen Entertainment, and here in Toronto, in the Toronto office. Originally, Paul took broadcasting, radio broadcasting at Humber, worked with The Record, which is a music industry hub for about 10 years, I believe, as chart editor, and then got into our metrics area and has been working in that field since 1997. So, welcome, Paul. So we're going to get started with the conversation. We're talking about discoverability in the music industry, in an industry which I think everybody knows has evolved significantly in the last 20 years. For certain the distribution has changed. Our business partners really in the music industry today didn't even exist 20 years ago. And I think we're still in a period of evolution. But let's start with discoverability. So let's define that, I guess, for what does that mean in the music industry today? And Steve, I'm going to start with you. You're working directly with artists, so what does discoverability mean to you, and how does it drive your day-to-day?
Well, I guess discoverability really has two distinct meanings for me. Obviously, one of the roles of a record company is the discovery of artists and how we come across an artist, how we start that process of taking them out to a wider audience. And that's quite honestly, a very small part of it. And has new technology changed how we discover artists, how an artist comes to our attention? Definitely. But it's no different finding an artist online than walking into a bar and having a hallelujah moment. It's that part of discoverability, that's still subjective, that's still somebody falling in love with a song, with an image, with a presentation of a musical work. Discoverability for fans, discoverability for consumption, that's the one that has changed so immensely. And how it's gone from a very small voice, a very small group of people using a megaphone outwards. Discoverability has gone from being a broadcast or a narrowcast to becoming a conversation, becoming a multi-level and multi-layered conversation with a lot more participants than there ever used to be. And that's part of an evolution of the music business that is continually ongoing. So I've been doing this on the label side of things for close to 30 years. And the only thing those 30 years have in common is change. So, that's the one constant. How we take an artist out to market, that's changed immensely, but it's still, as we navigate probably the biggest change this business has ever seen, which is a move, the recorded music business. It is a move away from ownership to access. And so when you start talking about access and making access points easy to get into, that entirely changes the game. So again, for me, the two things that never changed in this business is it's a continual evolution, and secondly, value. Value remains, no matter what the carrier, value remains in the creation and the content. So however we define that discoverability, however we dive into it, what we're really looking for is a creative piece of work that moves us. That's where the value lies, and that's why it's so important that these new mechanisms of discoverability compensate and protect creators.
Alan, respond to that. I mean,
Sure.
This notion, maybe to start with, that discoverability, many years ago was in the control of a much smaller number of channels or a number of individuals.
We had
and
our-
to much broader.
Our standard cultural gatekeepers. There was radio, there were record stores, there were record labels, music stores, music magazines. They told us, they sorted through all the chaff and gave us what they believed was the best stuff. Our problem today is one of signal to noise. The barrier to entry into becoming a musician and having your music distributed around the galaxy has never been lower. Anybody can do it. The problem is that too many people are doing it. And a lot of the people who are doing it really shouldn't be, because we don't have the cultural gatekeepers who are there to discover them and nurture them and coach them and do all these other things. So as a result, we have a lot of really raw stuff out there, and frankly, a lot of it wouldn't have made the cut back in the old days. So it becomes very frustrating for the music fan, or for people in my position in broadcast who are looking for the next big thing, because there's so much stuff to sort through. And after a while, you just get jaded and tired. And I want out of a discoverability paradigm, method, algorithm, whatever it is just give me the stuff that I want. Just give me the stuff that's interesting to me, so I can amplify it from my own point of view. But a signal to noise ratio, that's our issue.
Paul, you measure what's happening, and I know on the weekend there was, or I guess last week at Canadian Music Week, there was a really great national picture provided by Nielsen. What have you learned? What have you seen? What are the trends in discoverability?
I think, bouncing off of what Alan was talking about, accessibility, and everything is out there, everything is available, and I think, from what we've seen, we've done a consumer survey where we ask questions of a large number of Canadians, sort of asking how they discover music, how they consume music, and I think it's really interesting that with everything that's out there, everything that's at our fingertips, people still want to be led somewhere. The biggest thing, for example, Spotify, one of the major streaming services, the biggest things around Spotify are playlists. They're curated by somebody. And even though everything is out there to discover, people need that curation. They want that curation. They want to be part of a community that if somebody likes it, if a large amount of people like it, I feel I should be part of that. But it's separate. It gives you guidance to get away from that noise and find specific things.
There's always this need that people want to find someone just like them.
Right.
I mean, that was one of the biggest attractions of Napster, because you would go online and you would find somebody with a music collection that reflected your taste, and then suddenly you were no longer alone. There was somebody somewhere else in the world who was just like you, and that's what playlists do.
Exactly. The same concept behind Napster is actually is what's driving the playlist of Spotify and Apple Music to a degree. And it is that curator voice. And Alan, I agree with you that the barrier is very low. There's entry. I would go so far as to say they shouldn't do it. But we're still sifting. We're still looking for that gold standard, as is radio. There's a reason playlists are tight. I still remember many years ago, you addressing a CMW panel, a young artist getting up and bemoaning the fact that it was difficult to get on the radio. And your reaction, or your answer to him was perfect. It's stuck with me all these years. It's supposed to be. It's where the best end up. So, how did the best end up there now? To me, that's what's changed. And the curation piece is very important. But who are those curators now?
Yes.
And I would argue that there are curators who are rising above that noise. When you look at playlists that have hundreds of thousands of followers, in some cases a couple million, they're setting those filters. They're looking at that landscape and moving those artists up their playlists. And there's all kinds of algorithms within Spotify that tell you that you want to be in that top 3, top 5 level playlist, because that's maybe as far as people get. So the other part of that, of course, is playlists don't happen by accident. This huge myth that, and again, to Alan's point, this huge myth that you just have to put it out there and it will be discovered, it's nonsense. You scratch the surface of any viral, particularly in the music world, you scratch the surface of one of these viral stories, what you'll find is very sophisticated search engine optimization. You will find very clever content that is built, designed, and released into the world with the idea that it is attractive to share to people just like you.
Which is why Google ended up buying SongZone. Now, I was the director of curation for Canada before SongZone went that way. But that was the thing. We had people, actual human beings, coming up with clever, highly filtered playlists with cute titles. We had this one that was very popular. It was one of the most shared ones. We had this deal with, I guess it was not Johnson & Johnson, but Procter & Gamble. They wanted something for Mr. Clean. We have a new flavor of Mr. Clean, and we would like to embed a playlist in our Mr. Clean playlist, or Mr. Clean website. Okay, that's an interesting form of native advertising, but fine. We had somebody created a playlist called Rock Out with Your Mop Out, and that was hugely popular. And there were popular songs on the playlist, but there were also some really left field pitches, which is really cool.
So Steve, how do you as someone working with artists, how do you influence those playlists, those curators? How has that changed over the years, or is it very similar to the way you might have worked with radio in the past?
Well, again, it's interesting because there are so many points of entry. So there are tastemakers, there are playlists that you really want to work and seed and make sure that they've heard your music and get on those playlists and start to move them up. And they'll only move up those playlists if they're getting a reaction, if they're getting the number of streams that they like to see. We also have internal brands. Warner Music, for instance, has an international brand called Topsify. Those are our playlists. Universal has their own brand. There's a bunch of great indie labels that come together, and they've got their own brand. So you start to seed it in. So you mentioned Scott Helmet earlier. When we look at Scott and we try to think, okay, who's this audience? Because it's multi-layered. We want him on the same song list as Shawn Mendes, because Shawn gets a lot of plays. So we may stick Shawn Mendes on one of our playlists and Scott 2-3 songs below that. So that as that consumer starts to consume what they like, they're going to discover somebody that's in the same age range, has a lot of the same demos, say like for like. But we'd also take Scott Helman and put him on a sort of coffee house playlist, because the number of times that I've heard people hear a Scott Helman song for the first time and say, wow, he's like a young Paul Simon. Bang, I want him on a playlist right next to a Paul Simon song, so somebody can go from Me and Julio into Tikka Masala and say, wow, this kid actually does, somebody's still making that kind of music. And then it's a matter of, getting those playlists up, getting those songs moving up the playlist. Equally important, and this again is where barriers come down and point of entry becomes much easier. For about 3 or 4, I'd say about a month and a half, Scott's #1 streaming market was Paris. Now, there was also a video that Scott shot with a couple of members of Walk Off the Earth, who he was on tour with in France. Scott walking along in front of the Eiffel Tower, singing Bungalow, he was singing Machine. And a couple of the members of Walk Off the Earth walking behind him, playing it. That video, we made sure to get into the hands of a few French tastemakers. Our French company helped us a lot to get it on to key playlists on their internal playlists, and it caught on. So all of a sudden now I'm starting to create an international story. Modern Space, a band that has, we're only on 1 single. They have an EP. The Edge has been a terrific supporter of them. They've got massive streaming action going on in Germany, the UK, and the US. They don't have a record in many of those markets yet, but those streaming numbers are going to help me convince my local partners in Germany, France, and the US to release them. It is also at the point now where I can take all this data, and Paul did was part of an excellent panel with CMW, that can show as my streams go up, it gives me an opportunity to walk into some of Alan's colleagues and say, this is what people are choosing. They're choosing it. Look at how often they're playing it. Why isn't it on this radio station? Because it's clearly coming up to the cream. And one of the interesting reactions at the panel that I found a little alarming was, I don't know where the fellow was from, but he was a broadcaster who, his immediate reaction was, well, they only have to listen for 30 seconds for it to count as a stream. That sounded to me like it was coming out of a place of fear. But those, these are tools that I think you guys are now using in a very effective way.
Absolutely. If there was some kind of unified dashboard that brought together sales, streams, views, all that stuff.
We're good to do that. So.
Okay, because that would be fantastic, because right now, radio stations rely on chart positions and rely, if they've got enough money, call out. And that's fine, but that's only at the tip of the iceberg now. There's so much more music that's being discovered out there that doesn't go through the charts, that doesn't go through record stores, that something will bubble up on YouTube and all of a sudden have 1.5 million views over 2 days. We should be paying attention to that, especially if you are focusing on millennials.
And getting back to discoverability and the wealth of material that's out there, and yes, a lot of it's not very good, but a lot of it is. But it also has made available more than ever before the real niche formats that are never going to get big sales, never going to get big numbers when it comes to charts. But before, if you like country rap, you weren't going to find it in many places.
I want to meet that guy.
Me too.
Or any other real niche format. Now you can find that material pretty easily and
You
feel
know
like
what's
you're part of the community.
coming my way? Goth folk. I'm getting a lot of, I swear to God.
So they're all dressed in black and they're drinking a lot of coffee.
They're drinking a lot of coffee, they're playing acoustic guitars, and they're talking about the undead. I mean, it's really it's interesting stuff.
Well, see, again, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier, that discoverability is becoming less homogeneous. Like, there are all these niches that you can get to them a lot easier than you used to be. And the fans of those music, those communities, can start to find each other. So to my mind, music marketing has always been based on tribal aid. And what we're finding with again, streaming services, vlogs, the entire world of people actually being able to communicate now is those tribes are coming together faster and faster. And
They're also breaking apart faster and faster.
and yeah, and going into subsets, and so it goes to your noise and signal as well. But as marketers, as broadcasters, we need to be paying attention to those tribes. I think about a band like REM that took 4 or 5 albums to break and to really establish a mainstream audience. We're finding that's turning around a lot quicker. That has its pluses and minuses, and sometimes I wish artists were able to woodshop and toil a little more, so that when we do deliver them to broadcasters, we can look at it with complete certainty that we know they're going to be able to deliver beyond one song, beyond one touring cycle, that they've actually put the work in, and they're not going to get in the van and realize that a 24-hour drive is going to be the norm for them for the next 6 months, and you just watch them wilt. So,
Paul, are we seeing any differences in demographics in terms of, what have you seen in some of the stats?
As far as, well, the survey that we've just completed, that people are still listening to the radio and discovering that's the number one form of discoverability, but teens and millennials are maybe not getting their discovery from the radio. They're getting it from their friends, they're getting it from streaming, they're getting it from social media. I think that the age group, teens and millennials, are separating themselves from the pack of certain traditional forms of how we got our discoverability of music. And they're getting it in with using the technology that's available. I think one of our stats was that 71% of people, or 80% of people, listen to music through smartphones, but teens and millennials are at over 90%. So it's not just it's where they're getting their music, and not just the service, but how they're listening to it.
And here's the interesting thing too. If they can't find what they're looking for using their technology, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And herein lies a problem with some traditional terrestrial radio broadcasts. I'm going to get on my soapbox again. I have a radio show that's been running for 20 years. It is insanely popular over the air, but we can't make it available online for on-demand listening because of a variety of regulatory issues. So the problem is that my program ends up being torrented illegally with a lot of money being left on the table for everybody involved. And that's over for the people who actually want to go through the trouble of seeding and then downloading. But as far as millennials and teens are concerned, they don't even know I exist because my product is not available on their platforms. And this is something that the broadcast industry, copyright boards, collectives, record labels have to exist, because we have these ephemeral radio programs that are broadcast once or twice, disappear forever unless an enterprising kid puts it on a torrent.
but you can exist online, and you can exist on their technology. There's licensing that allows you to do that.
Yes, but the licensing.
What you're creating then is a permanent download. So
Yeah,
we have a regime that allows you to license that properly and make it available, and if the market is there to sustain it, then those licensing fees have to be built into your business model.
I agree, totally. Introduce me to that collective. I have talked to every single one, and we have yet to come up with a easy, unified, simple way of doing this. Currently, what we have to do, and I've had legal opinions on this, is we have to go to at least 5 different bodies and make 5 different negotiations and pay 5 different advance fees before we can even think about it. So, in theory, it's possible. In practicality, it's not.
Many businesses go through the same thing and then manage to do it. A song has a collection of rights holders, and it's not actually 5 different negotiations because most of us have a favored nation clause built into our licensing. So, and listen, I'm not saying it's easy. Sometimes it is onerous. It's not impossible. But these license regimes and licensing systems are in place to protect and compensate creators. They're not there to be an aid to startups. And that's been a huge problem from the very beginning of, going back to immediately post Napster, how the music industry should have seen this coming and they should have licensed to this one and that one, which we did. It took us a minute. And we got a lot of it wrong. I look at the current conversation going on around YouTube. We got that wrong. We made a deal out of a place of, well, something's better than nothing. I think if you haven't read Irving Azoff's open letter to YouTube, I encourage you to do so. It really zeroes in on the succinct problem of trying to create licensing, a licensing framework for this constant, the constant moving and seeing the rapid change in technology. I would love nothing more, Alan, than to make sure that the history of new music is available on every format, on every platform, because it's a fantastic program. It provides a lot of context for where music has been and where it's going. Those regimes exist. We do have to get them tighter. We have to make broad podcasting licensing a little easier to get to, but you have to acknowledge that what you're doing is creating a permanency on that download.
No argument.
And we have a regime, whether it's Apple download, I know what they pay us to sell a download, and what that license involves. We've got to figure out how to make it a little more streamlined. In Canada, we do have a number of collectives that are representing different right holders. In other countries, they've managed to come up with one collective. That's, hopefully we can work towards that period. But it's not impossible, and I think the idea that we don't want to work with new businesses is a fallacy, and we can point to hundreds of services around the world that we've managed to license. Some of them really good deals for both the provider, and some of them really good deals for the creators and rights holders.
That's great. My job is so easy.
Well, that's the
Get the three of you started. It's fantastic.
Yeah, look out.
Let's talk about video streaming for a little bit. Paul, can you talk to us about that and what the numbers are showing?
So video streaming in Canada was always the way people streamed. The numbers were huge for video compared to audio. And then Spotify came aboard, and with the reputation that they had in the US and around the world, that brought audio streaming up more. But the sea change was really when Apple Music came aboard, because it came aboard at the same time in both the US and Canada.
Did it really make that much of a difference?
Oh yeah, right away.
Interesting.
And to the point now where year over year, video streaming is up 19%, audio streaming is up 390%.
Yeah, but we started from a very low.
That's granted, but now for the last 2 weeks, for the first time since we've been tracking streaming, that audio streams have surpassed video streams. So I think that's probably a very good thing, especially if the audio streams are coming from a paid streaming. But it's showing that these services are really capturing people.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Steve, if you, it seems to me that what we're seeing is a difference in marketing. So the marketing of these services, certainly Spotify came to the market with some impact, and Apple Music. I mean, prior to that, we had, Rdio was serving Canada, a great service, but it really seemed to be the industry that knew about Rdio, and it just didn't penetrate the consumer market.
Well, they didn't never release their audience figures for Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But having worked with Rdio a little bit, I was told that the numbers were quite robust.
Yes.
And they were doing quite well. And the reason Rdio disappeared had more to do with the boardroom decision as to who should, pick apart the carcass of RDO.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to write a book on why RDO died,
Right.
and it's going to be ugly.
Is that your fifth book?
No, it's not mine. I'll make a lot of enemies telling this story.
Mhm. What do you think, Steve? What do you see as the difference in terms of now the impact of Apple Music as an example and Spotify?
Well, Apple has clearly a huge competitive advantage. They had 1 billion credit card numbers. So when they launched, for instance, when they launched in Canada, for me, it was a really easy decision.
That was one tick.
I like their product. I trust that they've had my credit card information for 10 years. The interface is pretty awful, but also instinctual. I mean, I find my way around it. But again, now Spotify, I found as their interface became more and more like RDO, I grew to like it more. And Spotify, again, they've got a worldwide brand, and they were able to take advantage with that. But I'll go back to something, value lies in the content and the creator. I've had this conversation with every streaming service, every download service. I remember when some of the companies, probably people in this room worked for, whether it was Bell, Telus, or Rogers, when they all launched their own music stores on their phones, they all did a terrible job. They don't market. They accumulate subscribers. What drives their subscriptions? Are these special offers, but it's access to that music. It's access to that content. Without that, what do they need? And I think it's fantastic when we're able to partner with them on their Spotlight program, which we had a couple of our artists win, and that's a social thing. It's their fans, it's their family and friends voting them up the chart. Emerge, it's the same thing. It's people interacting with content. They're providing us with a nice little box to put it in, but it's the artist's presence that actually drives it. So what it is doing for us is it's offering us some great partnerships. Make no doubt about it. The reach of Apple is so valuable to us. The most valuable piece of real estate in the retail world is that front page of Apple every Friday. It's the first thing I do when I wake up is I look and I check to see how many of our, how many slots did we get on that. It's funny because it's just a continuation of what we used to call the 10-foot rule. 10-foot rule. You wanted your record in the first 10 feet of a retail establishment. That was your goal. That's what you worked for. So, we're still doing that. What brought people in with Sam the Record Man? It was the release of the new Genesis record. It was the release of the new, it was about the content. The delivery system will come and go. Creativity and the content, that's what drives it. And we partner in marketing these people. It's funny, you mentioned video earlier. Again, I'm old enough to remember, we used to talk about videos as being commercials for an album. We now treat videos as an advertisement for the entire brand. And that's how we use it now.
The brand is the artist.
The brand is the artist. Which again is a big change because I would never, in a million years, 20 years ago, ever let the word brand slip from my lips while I was sitting with an artist or in some cases even a manager. I mean, that would have gotten you a stake through the heart. Now, any artist that is worth their salt and knows what they're doing and has chosen this as a career, they know they're a brand. Sometimes they have to spit that word out, but they all acknowledge that what they're doing is building a brand, touring, merchandise, records, what have you.
The other thing with YouTube is that it's not a music service. they have music on their service, but it's not, it's the vast amount of material that's on YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of these new stars that are doing programming on YouTube. They're not musicians, they're not creating music product. And you know, when when Billboard started started putting streaming as part of their Hot 100 chart, as part of their album consumption chart, it was decided among the industry that video streams would not be part of that. One of the reasons being is that they didn't want something like Bauer's Harlem Shake to affect the success of that song when people were going in and viewing those videos that maybe were not going there to listen to the song. They were going there to watch the video of somebody dancing around, or you know, a stupid cat video or something. And so I think, you know, that's when someone's going on an audio streaming service, they're going there specifically to listen to the music. Whereas on YouTube, there's other distractions around that.
I don't know. My teenage kids pretty much discover all music on YouTube.
I think you're right, yeah, but they may not. I think there was a study that I read last week where they're going on to YouTube a lot. They're not staying there for very long. They stay there for maybe an hour and then leave. And they click the continuous play button and that keeps going, but they may not be around there to watch it.
One of the issues, and I don't know that I 100% agree with you, Paul, they are a music service. And they're a music service that gets away with an awful lot.
Yeah.
Because, like Amy's, if my daughter can build a playlist, build a queue on YouTube, minimize it, and go about her business. And you know, there's been a lot of talk over the past, a lot of public talk over the past few weeks about the value gap. And when you look at the rate of consumption of music video streams on YouTube and what they contribute back as a fee, it's really quite outrageous. And those are the kind of deals that, you know, we have to get better at, at anticipating as best we can, anticipating technology and where it's going to go. And the deal that we made with YouTube many years ago is a very different world. And yes, it's not entirely music service, but I would venture to guess that it's had a lot to do with building their business.
For sure.
And again, I'll refer to Mr. Azoff's letter. When YouTube tells us it's difficult to police their station and to police content, they have a paywall that they keep their original programming behind. They can do it, they can keep pornography off, they can keep questionable material off. It's a will. And they know that music is a huge driver for them, and that anything that they do that makes it harder to access that could impact their overall business. Spotify, RDO, Apple Music. One of the things and one of the conversations that we have to have with these services as we go in to renew our deals is you need to make your ad-supported service, your freemium service, just a little bit uglier. If your goal is to drive subscriptions and to grow your business via a great subscription base, why on earth would you make your free service, your ad-supported service, just negligible from your paid service? I grew up with radio. I grew up with television. I can take a couple of ads every couple of minutes. It's no big deal.
Alan, on that issue of moving subscribers from freemium or ad-supported to paid, what do you think is the kind of the answer?
Well, it's tough because we have a generation and a half that has grown up on free music or music that is nearly free. I have a nephew that has never been in a record store in his life. He doesn't understand the need to buy anything on iTunes. And you know, for the most of his life, he had no credit card, so it wasn't an option. buying stuff on credit on iTunes, especially since Mom was not really interested in helping him out. So what we have right now is, in the United States, I think the figure is $40 a year on music purchases per person, something around that. $40 a year buying music. Now, when I was 17, I couldn't get out of a record store for less than $40. So when you have everybody charging $9.99 a month, that's $120 a year. That's 3 times the average spend. I'm not saying that $120 isn't a good deal. It is, especially when you're coming from my history and history of those of us who went into record stores, or even those of us who gorge on iTunes still. The problem is that we've got this generation that is not accustomed to paying anything for music. So what do we do with that? I don't know what the answer is. But other than education, other than making the value worth it,
I think it might have been easier if we went straight from, or streaming was closer to when physical and digital were there, and piracy wasn't involved. Because once that bottle was open,
a lot of things would have been
people,
easier if
a lot of
piracy
things,
wasn't
well,
there.
the people who grew up with the ability to get music for free whenever they wanted, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle.
But Paul, I noticed on the Nielsen figures that I think it was that streamers are actually spending more. So when you look at full spend, so money spent on festivals, concerts, everything all in, streamers are actually paying more than other types of
music fans, people who are engaged in music and who actively search out music, and we find that they're the paid streamers. They are engaged in all forms of music purchasing, whether it be festivals or shows or merchandising or anything involving, and still buying physical product. I mean, the money spent from people who are truly music fans, that you see it for the percentage of people who are paid streamers are paying more money for all music.
So that should be encouraged.
Yeah, and what's encouraging about that is I'm trying to remember who did this study, but as Paul was saying, they buy more tickets, they buy more t-shirts, they're involved in an artist's entire brand. They're also the artist's #1 ambassadors. People who are paying for streaming, people who are consuming on a live level, they're also the ones that are at the vanguard of the people like us, as you called them earlier on. They're the ones who want to tell their friends, go and check this out. And I love the fact that all of these subscription services and all these music services do give the fan an opportunity to turn into an ambassador for their favorite artist. And so those sharing functions, which we've legitimized and monetized, become very important. And what I love about it is, again, when I started in this business, word of mouth meant going up and talking to somebody and telling them about a great band. You actually had to use them. Now being able to have a word of mouth at a click of a button and to be able to spread it, and again, it goes back to part of the role of curation, part of the role of, why does anybody need a record company? They can just put it online. We build compelling, fun, engaging content that Paul, as a fan, wants to send, to Rob over there to say, I know you're a fan of X, or, you got to check this out. This is a great song and it's well presented. Like, those possibilities now are what keep us excited and engaged, and again, goes back to this democratization of curation. Everybody gets to be a curator, everybody gets to be a marketer, everybody gets to touch that band's career and impact it, and hopefully impact things like, in your music meeting where they go, geez, look at this, look at the shares on this. That must mean something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the old days when you had one friend that went out and bought the record for $7.99, and they made the investment, and as a result created the relationship with the band. And if they liked it, they would tell all their friends. And you would have to invite people over to listen to the record, to get, thing. But that was all done in person. Now you don't have to do it that way. You can do it, worldwide. And it's really, really cool. And your point about number of shares, I mean, I'd love to be able to see that on a dashboard, especially if it's new artists that we've never heard of before. There's an artist coming out of Los Angeles right now named Bishop Briggs. And the only reason I found out about her, write her down, Bishop Briggs, is because 3 people over the course of 2 days shared a SoundCloud link with me. And wow, this is a great song and a great artist. And now, if you look at some of the radio charts, you can see ads.
Yeah, it's probably going to run the radio chart this
Yeah,
week.
there you go.
So Paul's got his marching orders. You know what you need to do when you get back
Well,
to the
we,
office. It's
we
great.
are actually doing that with our connected product. Right now it's in the US, it's coming in Canada, but it takes sales data, airplay data, and social metrics as well. So Wikipedia views, Facebook likes, Twitter mentions, that kind of thing.
Wikipedia use.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's fantastic.
I'll give you one, Alan. There's a young artist that was just recently signed to Atlantic Records called Kiara. The song is called Gold. It was a bidding war over this artist. One song. She had a SoundCloud with 4 or 5, but it was this one song that just captured everybody's imagination. It became a bidding war. She never performed.
How did you find out?
SoundCloud. There were, she was now northward of 1 million listens on SoundCloud. And particularly American A&R departments, they've got an army of interns who just troll SoundCloud and YouTube, etc., looking for those metrics. Like 1 million people listen to this. I guess we should check it out.
So Alan, you need to hire a whole bunch of interns now to do the trolling.
I have a couple, and that's exactly what they do. I also,
By the way, after she signed to Atlantic, they were able to pitch it to Apple, and Apple used it that same track in a watch commercial.
Wow.
Or just to finish the.
see, and this kid, whoever this kid is, just suddenly out of the bedroom into the worldwide spotlight.
So I think it's probably a little bit easier to do A&R now than it used to be. Well, not necessarily easier, but instead of having to slog it out in clubs every night and then hope for some demo tape to come through, you can see a certain level of success before.
Yeah, that becomes an early indicator. I don't think, and again, in the case of Kara, had she not had a drawer full of songs that could back up Gold, had she not been interested in being a performer, there's all of those elements. But yeah, sometimes the discoverability of a song or an artist may have gotten truncated, may have gotten a little easier, but they still have to have all the other magic fairy dust around them.
Alan, let's bring it back to radio for a moment. So how does radio evolve or succeed in this changing landscape?
Well, we need to embrace these new metrics. Radio for the longest time, like I said earlier, is all about charts and call out. And there's more to what the audience is doing and consuming and listening and demanding and wanting and wishing for than just charts and call out. And there's also more than just a music director who has got a good gut and will make a call because he or she hears something in a particular song. That's not enough. That's still just one person doing this tiny little bit of curation. If we could have all this other stuff, and again, this idea of an unknown artist somehow magically acquiring 1 million listens on SoundCloud, well, yeah, I mean, this is something that we should know about, which is why, the Pitchforks of the world and the Stereo Gums and everybody else are also worth checking out, because every once in a while, you'll see something there, hear something there, see that there is a number attached to it. And that number has real meaning, because those are real people. And radio needs to be educated to get away from their old way of doing things, because that's not what's going to move the needle in the future.
Does Nielsen have any, insights into how then radio, let's say radio is able to evolve the way Alan would like it to evolve, could move with the demographics?
Well, I mean, I think the panel that we did last week, we really looked at instances where songs are getting a huge amount of on-demand streaming but are just not being played at radio.
Let's look at Psy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great example. You know, it's a couple of years old, but here was a guy that had racked up, 20 million, 25 million views, and nobody was playing on the radio yet.
Right. And now part of that is not necessarily the song, but also the video portion of it.
Right.
I mean, he doesn't get very many audio streams. He gets a ton of video streams. But in Canada, we never have really had an urban radio format. There were a few stations a number of years ago that leaned that way. It never really took hold. R&B, hip hop, really it does well on streaming. I mean, Drake, 22.5 million streams, audio on-demand streams last week. But those songs are not being played very much on the radio. Now you think that if people are actively looking for it and playing and want to listen to it on streaming, they might want to hear it on their radio station. So it might give radio top 40 format radio station. Maybe they need to see, well, this audience wants to hear these songs.
Well, the other thing is the way the record labels continue to market things in an old traditional way. This is the single. We want you to play the single.
And that's
move it up to the
absolutely
categories.
true. Yeah.
So it's the ecosystem.
It tends to take a little bit longer, though.
Yeah.
I think at radio, and we see it that with songs, it's now it's the life of the song starts at streaming, and radio takes a hold of it, and then sales happen, and then there's a peak, and then radio and sales drop off, and then the streaming continues. There's a long tail now for these songs. They have longer lives because of the streaming.
Let me ask you this, Al. In this world, as we see it right now, discoverability on radio, because we see the streaming go this way, and maybe radio comes in right here, and then we see like a nice upswing in sales and streams, because now we're being amplified by traditional terrestrial radio. So perhaps radio remains the strongest force for lean back discoverability. That I take a song like Lucas Graham, 7 years, massive streaming numbers around the world.
No radio to speak of.
No radio to speak of at that point. Now, and we were seeing it just go through the roof as far as streaming and singles downloads. Radio starts to come on board, gets a fantastic reaction, maybe because there's already a built-in audience, but maybe that lean back audience, they've now discovered a new artist. And I'm not a broadcaster, I've never worked in radio, but I have to think, is there discussion within the industry that maybe that's now our role? It's that lean back audience that's going to discover things, because when we look at centralized playlists, so David Corey adds something to Chum FM. That means, what is it, seven of the most important hot AC stations across the country automatically add it. David drops that record. Seven stations automatically drop that. So at a time where playlists become centralized, become even tighter, and again, I completely understand why playlists have to be tight. It's part of the product that you're selling. There has to be a predictability. So the point, as I look at it, I'm trying to figure out, as I target my audiences, my consumers, who am I going after first? And at what point do I start to kick in my marketing that centers on radio, as opposed to my marketing that centers on streaming and access?
Yeah, we need to figure that out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like when you introduce a song, you introduce it at alternative, and then it goes to rock, then it goes to CHR, and then it crosses over. So maybe this is yet another
crossover
layer.
Yeah.
So streaming, alternative, AAA, whatever on the way out.
It's fun to have this conversation. We could still do it over a beer.
We could.
That's usually where we have the
This conversation a little bit more
That's what we're
coherent.
And
Well,
we'll remember.
it's a good point, because it seems like, we're seeing in playlist consumption that most consumers are lean back consumers. So radio is a natural medium for that same inclination.
Maybe playlists need to be more flexible. And we see, for example, you bring us a song and it continues to do well, but then all of a sudden it's superseded by another track from that album because of the streaming numbers or whatever it is. Maybe we need to go, well, this is the one. Depends how fast we want to react. And it also depends on the nature of your listenership. Because the chances are the streaming people are far more early adopter than the ones who can experience the lean back listening for radio.
Let's see if there are any questions from the floor. I think we've got a microphone. If you can say your name and where you're from, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Greg Taylor from the University of Calgary. I guess it's not a word, it's just the phrase CanCon has not come up, not once.
Oh, I would be happy to talk about it.
Is it dead? Is it just?
Oh,
is it
no,
an
absolutely
option?
not.
How does CanCon? We just had the Junos in Calgary this spring.
No,
How does that fit into this new streaming digital world, or does it?
Absolutely it does. First of all, one thing that is never going to change is the fact that we are living next door to the greatest net exporter of popular culture on the planet. So in order to maintain our identity, we have to somehow have some protection put in place. What form that protection takes is going to be a very long and interesting, highly volatile political discussion. Should terrestrial radio, for example, still be at 35 or 40 or 45% or whatever it is when the online world is unregulated? How do we make sure that our artists get to tell our stories to our people? I would really, this is going to be such an explosive discussion because there are so many organizations in Canada who exist solely because of CanCon and cultural protectionism. So if we have to ask them to change their ways, they're going to fight back. So I can't wait for this discussion to begin because it's going to be a good one.
I agree 100%, and that there still needs to be some form of regulatory board to make sure that living next door to what we live next door to, that we can continue to expose Canadian music, Canadian film, Canadian television over what are public airwaves. And what form that's going to take and how it has to evolve is going to be absolutely fascinating. I will say one thing, though, Alan. The regulation is 35%. 40 and 45%, that comes from the broadcasters.
Yes, it does.
As they
Fight for radio
fight for
licenses.
radio license. And I'll refer back to a panel at CMW many years ago when that was the hot topic of a panel I was on. And I said at that time, guys, stop promising 40 to 45%, because one day the CRT is going to believe that that's what you want to do. And lo and behold, that day came, and it was a very hard fight. In the world of streaming, in the world of access, we still use the global music market as a way to insert Canadian music into the conversation. You know, the example of Scott Hellman and the spins he was getting, or the streams he was getting in Paris or in Germany, or Megan Patrick, who's a young country singer that we just signed. We seeded her song into some Nashville-based playlists. 60% of her streams are coming from a U.S. audience. That allows us to turn around when we hear the woes of Canadian content from some radio stations. It's like, yeah, but guys, here's an example where people are actually choosing it. They're choosing to listen to it on their playlist. They're not skipping forward. So I think a lot of what is happening in the unregulated market can actually be looked to verify that people do want to hear this music, and that if we can get the mix right, and I don't know if it's 35, I don't know if it's 30, but I do believe there is something be said for it. We got to figure out again what that balance is and how we use the new world to illustrate to broadcasters that people do want this.
Here's the problem, is that for the longest time, CanCon was treated as broccoli. You had to cover 35% of your dinner plate with broccoli. And whether you like broccoli or not, you had to eat it. It was good for you, trust us. It's good for broccoli farmers too. And eventually you will learn to like your broccoli. That's been the prevailing attitude for a very long time. Now, however, Canadians realize that we punch far above our weight internationally when it comes to exporting music for a country of our size and population. We are doing stupidly well, and we're the envy of many, many nations around the planet. I think one of the big aspects about the CanCon debate that's going to be coming up is how do we take what we have and export it?
Correct.
And make us bigger, not just in Canada, but make us bigger in the world.
And again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about when some of those barriers come down and point of access is points of entry are proliferating around the world, and that's good for us, and that's good for Canadian artists.
Okay, we've got another question.
So hi, I'm Genevieve. My God, I'm Genevieve Couty from SOCAN. I head the Quebec Montreal office of SOCAN. There's a few things. One, I'm glad that Steve brought in Megan Patrick and Scott, because all these 2 days, I've noticed that a lot of the people on the panels are talking about American stuff, even though they're Canadian. And so CanCon starts with us talking about Megan Patrick, who is absolutely fabulous, and by the way, has Chad Kroger songs. That's the single. So Canadian with Canadian. My question, Steve, you talked about the fact that you put Megan on a playlist. You, as Warner Music Canada, have some weight because of the Warner brand. Now, when you're in the Quebec market, none of us have that real weight. And I don't mean we have weight within our small little Francophone market, but when we get to Spotify, then we kind of get, oh yeah, but the skip rate on that is way too, so we don't have that weight. How do you see the weight being weighted, if I could put it that way?
And again, yeah, you're right. We're fortunate that we have some very big internal playlists that we can use that have a lot of ears on them. But we also go and we look for those tastemakers. We look for those playlists that are being curated and they've got a couple of 100,000 followers. We work them in the same way that we would work a radio station. We're getting the material to them. We're sharing the information with them. We're saying, it's like going for a light rotation and then building up. It's like, put us at number 30 on your playlist, and just let's see what kind of reaction we get. We have a team of people in house that curate and they create their own playlists. I mean, one of our most popular playlists from the Warner Music Canada office is one of the kids who has a huge knowledge and love of EDM. He's actually getting approached by by people trying to place songs onto his playlist. He's making himself a voice of authority. He's making himself a trusted voice. So it's a lot of digging, and it's targeting one or two lists that you think that you can get it on there and use all your other social marketing to try and drive up the plays. Point people towards that playlist.
I think it's absolutely fascinating that we've moved from the panacea of algorithmic playlist creation back to human curation. The human element is so important because people want to know that it's not a computer picking their music, because computers don't know anything about music. And sure, with respect, apologies to Pandora and their Music Genome Project, it's still best to have a real human being with tastes and a gut that will tell me that this matters.
And then you trust that person.
Yes.
And
Trust your filters.
Yeah, it's so important.
Prem, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. My name is Prem Gill. I'm from Creative BC and the BC Music Fund. I have two-ish questions. First, the question about the urban radio stations was really interesting because yesterday there was a couple of women from Washington State, one was from the FCC, and she said, I can't remember the number, but it was something like over 1,000 urban-owned radio stations, African American owned radio stations in the States, and through consolidation, there's now 40 or some, or 30, like are, you know, amongst 320 million people, a very sad number, I think. And we've seen something like Tidal come along that's really trying to promote a specific genre of music to a specific demographic, and we've seen consolidation in Canada as well. So when you say there's, you know, one guy at Chum Radio who's programming, picking songs, and then they go to the 7 radio stations, I guess what is the impact on that, especially on the independent music labels, like the smaller, not the Warners or the Sonys, but how do those other guys fit in? And then one thing that I've heard a lot from people from those smaller music labels is that when they do get programmed into a Spotify playlist, and I listen to these kind of split playlists all the time, I'm going for a run, but I really want a cheeseburger or whatever it is, but you don't remember the artist, because you're just doing something. So it's the I have friends over for dinner and I'm making Japanese food playlist. That it's great because I'm listening to all kinds of music, but I'm not connecting to necessarily who the artist is. And I think these questions are kind of related, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, that's a real problem. I find myself having to pick up my phone and look at what my Sonos is playing for me because, hey, I really like this. I have no idea who it is or where it's from. And this is the problem with streaming, is that you rarely, or it becomes more difficult to establish a relationship with whatever music that you're listening to. It's just part of a vibe.
Except at least you have the ability to take a look at your
Yes.
phone and see the artist, whereas a radio they may not back announce the
Right.
the name of the song or the artist. So at least there is that ability.
Yeah, so it's always been a problem. At least now, you can figure out what, you can at least look at your phone or your radio when you have the RDS display. Yeah.
And as far as the independence and being able to get on those playlists, again, I'll go back to Mr. Cross's comments from many years ago. It's hard to get on the radio. It's where the best end up. Strumbellas are having a moment. They are having, and they have worked their asses
Number
off.
1 US this week.
Number 1 US. This is a band that built it from,
From Lindsay, Ontario.
yeah, I'd say
My
from below.
hometown, sorry.
From below.
I
street
still
level.
live there.
And and again, you can go back a couple years. I think back a few years to Bedouin Sound Clash. That there's no. We were working that record, distributing it on behalf of our friends at Stomp, a fantastic label out of Montreal. And when we first heard it, we thought, well, that could probably fit on radio, and we could probably take a run at it. But truth be told, they got in a Zellers commercial for patio furniture because this song felt so summery. And I hand it to, that was an independent label who looked at a wall in front of them, which was the monolith of radio at that time, and figured a way to go under that wall, over that wall, around that wall. Commercial hits, starts to sell on iTunes, and retailer getting a request for it. And I think at the time Edge might have been the first station to jump on it. And so yeah, again, it ain't easy for any song to get on the radio, no matter what label you're on.
Well, I'll tell you what also happened was the members of the band went to one of our personalities and made friends.
Yes.
And that personality was part of the music meeting, and he would come in week after week. You got to check out this Bedouin Sound Clash. You got to check out this band called USS. You got to check out this band called Watch Us on Fire. And he became an evangelist inside the system, and all 3 acts ended up on the radio and are still viable acts for radio in Canada.
We're almost out of time.
I have a question.
Oh,
Okay.
excellent, of course.
I'm
You did
Jared
organize.
Goldberg, one of the producers of the Discoverability Summit here. I'm also a huge music fan, as you guys know as well. How are covers playing into the mix of generating money for labels and for artists now? Because there's so much covers, as you see on YouTube, of random people doing covers, and it gets millions of plays. One of my favorite playlists is on Spotify, which is acoustic covers. And I hear amazing songs like Teardrop, Massive Attack. I heard amazing acoustic stuff. I got a cover that I listen to fall asleep every night now. And I'm huge into acoustic covers now. And that's a playlist I listen to almost every day. How is that coming into play with these little people are in their car with their camera at the front, and a cover is getting 1 million streams of a Drake track?
Now this is Metallica, by the way, and there's a guy who was putting out ukulele versions of Metallica songs, covers, and they're fantastic. He's got one out this week of Blackened, with complete with this whole. It's just, just amazing.
Well, it is a thing, and actually, SoCan maybe better, better able to answer this. It is on the publishing side. YouTube is the Wild West, and that's one of the issues. That's the value gap issue. That are you, prepared to have a content ID system that will make sure that all creators are being remunerated. And when you see these cover versions, again, I'll separate Spotify and the streamers from YouTube, because they do have a system in place and they are properly licensed and they are paying their dues. YouTube's a different case, and that's something that my friends in the publishing business are facing now. And how do you make sure that your writers are being properly compensated? Because some of those cover versions on YouTube in particular are runaway successes. Now, the interesting thing about covers as well, Jared, is again, they've become calling cards. We actually, as we plan out a lot of our campaigns in introducing a new artist, we encourage them. Hey, why don't you throw? Let's put together a couple of covers, and we'll give them to the streamers, and we'll make sure that they're available. Scott Hellman, again, you look at him, 20-year-old, he looks about 15. He was 15 when I signed him. He looked about 12. He had an opportunity to take part in a covers album. It was spearheaded by a British company, and it was hits of the 80s, or songs of the 80s. And Scott chose Tom Waits' Jockey Full of Bourbon.
That wasn't really a hit.
It wasn't a hit, but it also helped us differentiate him from the other 19-year-olds out there. I adore Shawn Mendes. I think he's fantastic. I don't see Shawn covering Jockey Full of Bourbon. But when you look at, and again, Shawn Mendes with his Vine covers, covers gave him a career. It gave him a platform to launch from.
And look at how much Taylor Swift benefited.
Walk of the Earth.
Walk off the Earth.
Taylor Swift.
Drake. I mean, these memes become huge, and they become advertisements for the original.
Yeah, but when these covers hit and they get a lot of listeners or views, it promotes the original song. I mean, and if you look at every time when American Idol is on and they're covering a song, we'll always see a big spike on the original version of the song. So in that respect, it's helping the originals as well.
There's a cover on Spotify. They have the earliest version just of you was watching me. It's 50 times better. And I was like, what?
Have you heard that? No, we won't let this turn into a music geek conversation. But have you heard Ryan Adams did an entire cover of Taylor Swift's 1989 record?
Sounds nothing like the original.
Sounds nothing like it, and you realize how well crafted some of those songs are.
This has been a great conversation. I want to thank the audience for their attention. I want to thank all our panelists, Paul, Steve, and Alan. And I understand this has been recorded, so I imagine you can watch your favorite moments again and again. Thanks a lot.
Get those YouTube views up.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you for keeping us under control.